Hey, welcome to the program. Charles Moscowitz here. And my guest is Ed Brodow. He's the author of several interesting books, particularly his latest, Trump's Turn, Winning the New Civil War. Let's see here. I want to make sure I get your bio right, Ed. You are a best-selling author of 8 books. You're a keynote speaker, negotiation expert, political commentator, actor. You served as a negotiation and consultant to Microsoft, Goldman Sachs, Learjet, the Harvard, among others. Your speaking career has taken you to Paris, Milan, all the great cities of the world, it looks like. Ed, thanks for joining me this afternoon.
It's a pleasure.
Your book is quite topical, Trump's Turn, Winning the New Civil War. We heard a lot from, of course, the Obama election of transforming America. And we saw kind of what that was going to be like. I think that Obama tried to implement that. I would argue it was a continuation of the same old, but nevertheless, Trump's election has really proven to be a genuine transformation and one that I think is almost a counter-revolution in the modern sense. Talk a little bit about the premise of your book.
Well, the premise of my book is that we have a civil war that's based on the question, how much should the government interfere with our lives? And you have, on one side, you have conservatives who believe that the government should have limited control over the individual. The conservatives believe in the Constitution and the rule of law. On the other hand, you have the progressive liberals who believe that the government should be everywhere. The government should exist for its own right, its own sake, that the individual exists to serve the state and not the other way around. And the objective of people like Obama is and has been to have us controlled by a group of unelected, unaccountable bureaucrats. In other words, the deep state. That's what Obama was out to do when he said that he wanted to fundamentally change America. People didn't realize then what he meant. They thought that he wanted to do something good for this country. Actually, Obama hates this country. And what he wanted to do was to make it more like the old Soviet Union. So when you say that the Trump phenomenon is a transformative, it is in every sense of the word, because Trump is turning back all of the negative things that Obama did for 8 years. And he did a lot of damage to this country.
You know, when you say that Obama wanted to transfer the country to a government run by unelected bureaucrats, Obama was quite explicit about that. He gave an interview to an NPR station in Illinois when he was still a local state rep, where he literally he said this: we need to have rule by administration, and the bodies of administration and bureaucracy, and that's the best way to do an end run around the Constitution. This goes back to, we could do the history of it. It goes back really to 1912 and the election of Wilson, but it's a fascinating history how this trend toward rule by other than people who have a limited authority and who are elected to represent us. And that you're quite right. President Trump has gone back to that original model where the power resides genuinely with the citizen and not with these unelected bureaucracies, whether they be domestic or international. And he has begun the painful process of disentangling us from some of those. And they're not sitting and taking it quietly either. I mean, we know there's virtually been an attempted coup against this administration, one that continues to go on. And I think that a very revealing lesson from the pandemic, which is a real crisis, and we should stay in and stay safe, is that you have leftists clamoring every day for a federalization, a seizure. In a sense, if Hillary Clinton had been elected president, we'd probably have martial law by now. We would have concentration camps with people who were, enemies of the state going outside, in this case, enemies of the medical state would be sent. We would have had a nationalization of entire segments of our corporate industry, of our corporate structure, of our private property, of our currency, of everything. And I thank God that we have Trump in office right now because he's balanced need for certain emergency measures in certain select cases with the maintenance of our system of state control and sovereignty and all the rest. So maybe a lesson that we can take from this is that the left is really showing its true stripes, and we need to understand that and what that means.
I agree with you. I think that the left sees the coronavirus as an opportunity for bigger government.
That's right.
And see, on the one hand, I mean, I recognize the need for stringent measures to protect the citizens
Sure.
from the coronavirus. But I think we have to balance that with the constitutionality issue. And I have serious questions about some of the things that the government is doing. I just don't like I don't like the idea of the government coercing me to stay at home.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
A problem with that because number one, it enhances the government's ability to have more control, and second, I think that it's an hysterical response to the virus. The virus is not anything new. We've had these viruses for years and years. The statistics that I've seen since 2010, the last 10 years, every year we've had between 20 and 60 or 80,000 people die from various flus. So this is nothing new, but we never panicked before. But here, all of a sudden, we're panicking, and I think that the same objective could be accomplished with a more sober, more moderate approach, where people understand that they have to keep their distance from other people. You have to wash your hands. If you sneeze, cover your face. These are things that people can do without the government saying, you must stay at home. You cannot do this. You cannot do that. That scares me.
Oh, yeah, definitely. It's very scary. And I think that the government, as Teddy Roosevelt said, the government should have the role of the bully pulpit. In other words, they can advocate these things and suggest them. But the idea of having them come in with the force of law and tell people they have to be at home, that's what the left wants. They want to actually have a national imposition of this. And, it's really an overreaction, to put it mildly. And they seem to want to drag the thing on. They want it to continue as almost a permanent state of medical martial law. And anytime some good news comes up, like, for example, the use of certain drugs that have proven to be pretty effective in counteracting the virus, they try to denigrate that and criticize and scream and holler. I think that they are showing their true stripes in that sense. I mean, I made reference to the drug hydrochloroquine, which has been very effective, and it's being used right now in New York State, by the way, with thousands of cases. Well, I don't know thousands, but hundreds of cases. And yet, if you mention the word hydrochloroquine on Twitter, you could have your county commission. It's like almost like a social control thing. I mean, they don't want the good news to come out, that there are drugs that are being used and quite effectively. Not that you should run out and get them. It's under doctor supervision. It's like anything else. And it also does have some negative side effects like most drugs. But that when there's a piece of good news coming out that maybe could end this pandemic, they want to keep that out. Maybe it goes down to what Obama's chief of staff, Rahm Emanuel, so famously said when he said, don't let a crisis go to waste. They want this thing to go on long enough, and the longer they can drag it on, and the more damage they can do to the economy and to our psyches, maybe they can even destroy the Trump presidency. That's what I think that's what they want to do.
That's what it's all about, really. If you want to be honest about it.
Oh, I don't doubt that.
It's all about destroying Trump. If Trump says chloroquine is a good thing, they'll say, no, it's terrible. If if Trump has the solution for cancer, they're gonna, they're gonna.
Oh my God! I mean, if he created a cure for cancer tomorrow, they'd criticize it.
I knew as soon as I heard about this coronavirus, I said to myself, they're going to blame Trump for this thing somehow.
Oh yeah, sure. Oh, and and the irony is that meanwhile, there you have when Trump did the logical thing that any sovereign nation would do, and now even states are doing, which is to shut the border so that the virus doesn't come in and check people at the border to see what their temperature is. And he did this last January, right during the impeachment fiasco. He was roundly there were howls of rage coming out of the left. Oh my God, he has something against Chinese men and women, apparently. And then you had Nancy Pelosi and AOC and all these other leftists walking through their Chinatowns in their neighborhood saying, come on out, come to a restaurant, have a good time. Everything is fine. Let's show solidarity. And those people are now the ones getting the virus. I mean, you talk about, meanwhile, during his State of the Union address, he warned the country about this coming virus. And there's Pelosi there ripping it up. So, I mean, let's see who is to blame for the spread of the virus. I mean, there would have been reasonable, moderate measures that could have been taken. And this whole idea that there's somehow the right of a nation to control who comes in and who goes out. Now we see how progressive that is, because now you have Canada shutting their border after Trudeau had criticized Trump in the most nasty terms for shutting the border with China. Now he shut his own border. Now the European Union finally, after 1,000 people are dead in Italy, they've decided to shut their borders. So you see the importance of sovereignty, the importance of nationhood. When you protect the national home, is no different than protecting your own private home.
Well, Trump was preaching. He was ahead of the curve on this from the very beginning. During the Republican presidential debates, he was the only one that would even discuss the issue of borders and
yeah, sure.
But he had it all right from the very beginning, and now they're coming to realize that he was right.
Now you even have like my own home state of Massachusetts is shutting its borders. I mean, there's talk about shutting the bridges to Cape Cod. Well, I mean, this is a normal, natural thing to do at a time of crisis. A nation has a right to protect its borders from a foreign invasion, whether it's a literal physical invasion by people, or in this case, an invasion by a disease. It just makes sense. It's progressive. It's a democratic idea. It's a part of the idea of controlling your own life and destiny and having your government act as a proxy in controlling the nation's life, because we as individuals, that's why we set up governments. It's one of the basic founding, building blocks of sovereignty.
Well, this is why I have a bone to pick with the Democrats, because instead of looking out for the country, they're just looking out for power. And the whole idea of having open borders, in my view, from the Democrats, is that they feel that all the people that are going to come in, or most of them who are going to come into the country, are going to vote Democratic. And that's why they want open borders, not because they think it's a good thing for the country. So,
absolutely. My guest is Ed Brodow. The book is Trump's Turn, Winning the New Civil War. Excellent book. It's available at Amazon and other locations. There we go. Thank you, Ed. And you've got some other pretty good books there, too. And I'd like to get back to you with those. But yes, I mean, look, they have to explain to us now why they oppose securing the southern border. I don't think people are buying this idea somehow that it's because, Trump has something against Mexican men and women. That's how, I don't think people are accepting that now. Now people are grateful that we're securing our borders. And the fact that the U.S. Congress, the House, and formerly the Senate operating with them, the Democrats, prevented Trump from getting any funding for doing that. They should have to answer to that. I mean, there was a while ago that they were talking about the inhumanity of people coming over the border and being separated and whatnot. Well, the Trump then immediately signed a $3.5 billion appropriation passed by bipartisan Congress to help alleviate that problem, and it largely has. But we need to take a look at some of the people that oppose that, including the left-wingers, the so-called squad, and some of the people on the far left. What do they want to see? People, children dying in prison? We need to call them down on that.
Well, when you're talking about the squad and some of the other things that the left has put into place now, letting criminals out of jail, ending bail. I mean, you look at this
Oh, it's insane.
whole list of things that the Democrats are trying to do that don't pass the test of common sense. You wonder what on earth are they trying to achieve? And I believe that what they're trying to achieve is they want to get Trump out. They want to get somebody like Hillary in so they can continue what Obama started. That's what it's all about.
Oh,
And
I agree.
earlier, it's all in service of getting the country into a state where it's run by an elite of unelected, unaccountable bureaucrats, and they almost got away with it. If it wasn't for Trump, we'd be getting away with it. And
oh, absolutely. And I think I think you really put your finger right on the most basic issue, which is that for the past almost century, this country has gradually and quietly but inexorably slid in the direction of transferring power from elected officials who are given a limited time in office and have to operate under a constitution to these unelected, massive, unaccountable, faceless, and often non-American bureaucracies who then get to control. I mean, this is what this whole movement is about. This is what the Brexit movement was about in England. The English suddenly woke up and realized that intricate aspects of their private lives, their education of their children, social issues were being relegated and delegated by some foreign entity, and that they had lost control. This is what the Yellow Jackets in Paris are about. This is what the people fighting in Hong Kong are trying to do. I mean, it's an international movement to reassert sovereign rights.
What global warming is about.
Oh, well, yeah, that's an interesting subject.
If you look at where it came from the UN. And the UN would like to see a one world government run by the bureaucrats at the UN, more bureaucrats. But that's what global warming is all about. It's already, global warming has been debunked. It's a hoax. But the idea behind it was to take what we have and give it to third world countries. That's what global warming is about.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's worse than that. What it is like if you take a look at the Rio Agreement and the so-called international agreements, they're basically saying it's kind of like in the 1980s, the anti-nuke movement in the United States. They're talking about just the United States reducing emissions, not the rest of the world. What are they going to tell China? Are they going to tell Brazil? I mean, they want to transfer American wealth to these other countries, which are spewing massive amounts of pollution into the atmosphere. Now, I'm not against reducing pollution. I think that's good as a matter of public policy. And, I mean, I drive a hybrid. I mean, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think we want to have cleaner air for a lot of reasons. But this whole idea of this, Trump pulling out of this international, global warming thing, was that organization going to do anything to reduce a single carbon in the atmosphere? There's just a transfer of wealth to these corrupt so-called green groups and these shadowy organizations. And by the way, that's it's interesting that in the coronavirus, suddenly Congress passes this $2 trillion stimulus package. It's as if they had it already written and sitting at someone's desk ready to go. And in that thing, we don't even see what's in it, but there's a lot of transfer of wealth to these shadowy leftist groups, both in this country and internationally.
Well, I mean, this is what as I said, this is what the whole thing has been about from the very beginning. And the Paris Agreement was not about global warming,
no,
environment, or pollution. It was a political movement, and this was admitted by the people at the UN who put the thing together. They said, this is not about environment. This is about redistributing the wealth of the globe, just as Obama wanted to redistribute the wealth in this country.
And they scare the crap out of us with their predictions of the Earth burning, and it's kind of like, I don't know if you've heard of this, and I don't have a lot of information on it, but apparently in the 1960s there was this think tank group that was part of the Hudson Institute in New York, and I think it was headed by former late economist John Kenneth Galbraith, and they studied the question of how to create a world system. They give it different euphemisms, and what could be done. And they came up with the thesis that they needed to scare the world's population into accepting it by means of two ideas. The first was environmental crisis, about to destroy the world, and the second was invasion from space aliens. Apparently, they went with the first one.
I wish they'd gone with the second one. That would have been more.
No, that one, I guess it seemed less plausible, but since that was really the beginning of the global warming agenda. Now, again, I mean, look, we can take reasonable measures using scientific means and encouraging business to reduce carbon in the atmosphere. Fine. But this idea that there's this global, the Chicken Little, the sky is falling, henny penny, it's really, it's suspicious, to put it mildly. I mean, it's an understate.
It all goes back to the same thing. It's the objective on the left in this country is to get rid of capitalism, to impose socialism, and to make the country into an authoritarian state.
Yeah, exactly.
Run by a bunch of bureaucrats. That's their objective. And there's only really one person who has stopped that and who has prevented that from happening. And that is Donald Trump.
I agree. It's amazing. I mean, I thank God for Trump. I mean, I pray for his safety every day. It's an incredible thing. It's amazing that he's there at this time, especially. I see some positive glimmers that are unexpected byproducts of the corona crisis. The fact that people are now learning the importance of prepping, of having enough supplies in reserve for like 4 to 6 weeks in case of emergency, that's a very good thing. I mean, that people are realizing that they can't depend on others. They can't depend on the government, certainly, for their own safety and survival. So, I think going forward, I hope we learn that lesson. And also, people at home are beginning to telecommute. They're homeschooling their children. It's almost a return because, maybe after this, people may not want to go to these massive offices. They could work from home and they could be with their families more, and they could bring up their own children and do homeschooling. And it's kind of like almost a move, I think, sociologically toward maybe what America was like in agrarian times, which I think is good.
Well, there's another side to that. And that is the side that you look at all these kids today. The kids don't play with each other. They're on the computer all day. That's right. A very dangerous thing. And what I'm afraid of is what you're talking about now is going to accelerate that. Yeah. So people move further and further apart. And that, I think, is a dangerous
I agree. Yeah.
phenomenon. I think we need to maintain human contact. And
I agree.
I also think I would tend to disagree with you about hoarding things. I think that one of the lessons that I've learned from this thing, watching how people hoard toilet paper, I mean, which is crazy, as though toilet paper is going to prevent you from getting a disease. It's not rational. And
no, it's an overreaction, but I just think it's not a bad idea. I mean, it kind of reminds me of my late grandmother used to have a cabinet filled with tuna fish and peanut butter in case the Ruskies came. It's sort of like it was an old American idea, and I always thought it was a good one and an interesting one.
Well, I think that we just need to calm down and stop panicking. And I go to the supermarket. The first week that this thing broke out, I went to Whole Foods, and I was watching people, and it was very frightening.
I know people get whipped up.
I'm going to get mine, and they were loading up their carts and pushing people aside, and that's a very dangerous thing.
Oh no, and people are very. I mean, I have a very close member of my family who is, is so frightened that she's practically like wiping antiseptic every time she takes a step on the floor. I mean, it's it's crazy, and I think it has a very, very dangerous psychological effect on some people. I mean, it does have a whiff of, coordinated whipping of hysteria, if you will. I mean, it's sort of like it's almost like a horror movie. This unseen monster is lurking at the door, and it just has like a patina of contrived fear to it.
What's dangerous is that all this promotes the idea that government can solve all the problems. That
Right.
government can change the climate, which is ridiculous. Government cannot change the climate. Government cannot prevent viruses. We have viruses with us. We can deal with it without panicking and shutting down the whole country, shutting down the world. This is really nuts, and it's going to take a long time economically to spring back from what's going on now.
And it kind of reminds me also of the situation around the Great Depression, which the late Milton Friedman said that it was at least partially, if not even largely, a product of the Federal Reserve System. And what happened back then, and people don't really understand this fully, is that some of the elites, the deep staters, what we used to call the Eastern Seaboard liberal establishment, these people got out of the stock market and transferred their assets into tangible goods and real estate and object d'art and things that retain value, gold, before the crash. And then after the crash, they came back in and they bought up and consolidated their influence and power by buying up businesses and companies and properties on a bargain price. And I sense the same thing could happen here. You have, businesses, small businesses are really suffering from this. The restaurant industry, small mom and pops, they're really taking the major hit here. And, in the status quo ante, once things are, moving at least more towards some normalcy, you're going to have the big companies further consolidating their powers, like the Amazons and the big liberal .coms and all the rest. I mean, I hope that doesn't happen, but I get the sense that we ought to be very careful about that.
Yeah, I worry about how many businesses are going to stay out of business as a result.
Exactly.
But also, people are changing their habits. A friend of mine just pointed out something I thought was very interesting. He went to the store to buy peanut butter, and he normally buys a cheap peanut butter, Skippy or whatever it is. He said all the inexpensive peanut butters were gone, and the only things that were left were the boutique expensive ones. And my friend said to me, I think when this is over, people who in the past would buy the boutique items are not going to do that anymore. They're going to buy basic items. So a lot. I think he's right. I think a lot of our buying patterns will change. I think a lot of companies are going to go out of business. Couldn't adjust to this, and it's going to be some real serious effects of this hysteria that we're seeing right now.
No, although, I mean, just as to counterpoise a little bit here, I saw a sort of a slightly humorous article saying that in response to stocking up for the crisis, people were getting away from the kale and the wheatgrass, and they're buying Oreo cookies and and Twinkies. So it's almost like Kraft and then some of these other brands that were not doing so well suddenly are being taken. You can't find them on the shelf. So I don't know. I mean, it's just a little counterpoise there. But Ed Brodow, what do you see? I mean, talk a little bit about your book. We're reaching toward the end of the segments. I want you to talk a little bit about your book and about yourself and what you're working on now. And, this is really, really, I mean, it's really quite fascinating what you're doing.
Well, what I'm doing really is a response to the 2008 election when Obama was running for president. Prior to that time, I was not a very political person. And all of a sudden, friends of mine, people I thought were my friends, called me a racist because they found out I wasn't voting for Obama. I was a racist.
Of course,
And
that was the
got my
mantra of 8 years. Anybody who opposed anything that had to do with Obama, well, it must be, well, Obama's black and you're opposing Obama, therefore you don't like black people. I mean, that was the mantra of 8 years.
well, that got my blood up.
Yeah.
And ever since then, I've been writing about political topics. Before that, my books were business books. I wrote a very
Mhm.
popular book called Negotiation Boot Camp, which is still a bestseller.
Oh,
But
yeah.
I'm writing books like Tyranny of the Minority, Trump's Turn, In Lies We Trust. I'm very, very concerned about what the left is trying to do. I'm also concerned that conservatives like you and me, for the most part, have a tendency to keep their mouths shut.
Right.
A lot of people who are afraid to speak up
Because we're
about their
working for a living. We're too, we don't have time to sit around on our trust funds and on our, checks and go, shoot our mouths off. We have jobs in many cases.
just fear. And
Yeah.
conservatives need to speak up. And
No, I agree.
on my part, I'm writing and I'm talking about what I think are the important issues, and I'm writing about why it's important for Trump to be reelected, and why it's important that the legacy of Obama be obliterated, and why it's really important going forward to 2024. We got to be certain that a Democrat is not elected, because the Democrats have just gone off the deep end.
No, I mean, I agree. And certainly the election of Trump has driven many conservatives underground because the hatred and the vituperativeness and the nastiness, people have lost jobs. They've lost opportunities by even merely suggesting that they support Trump. I mean, I've had people come up to me because everyone knows I do, because I'm a public person and I'm an author and I'm a blogger and I have a YouTube, and there's some people know where I stand, that they come up and they speak, sotto voce, Chuck, we're with you, but don't tell anybody. I mean, it's really like an atmosphere of fear out there because the hatred and the nastiness has reached such a level. And the reason it's reached such a level is because Trump's been successful. Trump means what he says. It's not the usual blather. You hear like even Obama and Bush, the Bushes, they all talked about, the greatness of Americans, nationhood, and all this, and keeping out, illegal aliens. But Trump means it, and they know that, and it threatens their entire rotten edifice, something they've been building for 100 years, and so they're just going after him. I mean, there was even one doctor who said that she didn't think they should treat people with coronavirus if they were Trump supporters. I mean, it's gotten really ugly out there.
That's right. This is just insane. It's really, I've had several friends, people I've known for years, for decades, who won't talk to me anymore.
Yeah, me too. My own mother didn't stop talking to me. She stopped talking to me after she heard I voted for Trump.
This just blows my mind. A couple of my friends who I thought were really close friends, they will not talk to me because
No.
Trump, unreal.
No, your experience is across the board. I mean, anybody who supports Trump is dealing with that, and it's ugly.
You know what? I don't want those friends.
I know. No, I agree. I mean, listen, they're showing the true colors, and it's, tough noogies for them. I mean, you're right. I mean, it's hard. It is difficult when you're in business and, you're trying to get ahead because you're not going to be seen as one of the beautiful people. So I get that. I mean, it's not easy like if you're in Hollywood to come out and support Trump, not in that atmosphere.
Well, as you probably know, I was an actor.
Yeah, that's why I'm bringing it up.
This whole thing in Hollywood is really disgraceful, and it's also based on fear.
Oh, totally.
Actors are at the bottom of the feeding chain, of the food chain in Hollywood. And if you want to get a job and you're known as a conservative, they're not going to hire you. So what do? You say, "Oh, I'm a liberal," and that's what's going on. It's.
Hollywood's always. I mean, this happened like in the late 1930s. If you were an anti-communist, you didn't get a job in Hollywood. I mean, I saw an interview with Dalton Trumbo, who was a communist, and he was asked about that, and he goes, "Look, I'm not particularly political, and I don't believe in communism, but this was how you got jobs back then. As a screenwriter, I wanted to work, so you had to kind of kowtow. So that's typical of Hollywood anyway."
Well, that in its is un-American.
Oh, totally.
And the left is behind this. So the left is un-American, in my view.
I couldn't agree more. All right, Ed Brodow, I want to thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. Really interesting talk. We should do it again soon.
Thank you.
And have a great day, and I'll send you a link of it. Thank you.